We sometimes don't pick our places. Um, but we have an NTSB Go team that arrived in Canton just several hours ago, and we're beginning an investigation into a crash of an AirCare 3 Eurocopter operated by MedTrans Corp, which resulted in 3 fatalities. NTSB is an independent federal agency that is tasked with investigating every civil aviation crash in the United States, along with other major transportation accidents and crashes. We also issue safety recommendations in an effort to try to prevent those things from happening in the future. Now, before I go any further, let me just express condolences on behalf of the entire NTSB to the families and friends of those who perished in this accident. We know it's a traumatic time for not only them, but for the community and for the first responders. Our hearts and thoughts go out to them and everyone affected by this. Before we go into some of the details of the accident, I did want to mention we've also started briefing Senator Wicker's office, along with Senator Hyde-Smith and Congressman Guest. I also want to sincerely give our appreciation to the sheriff who's with us from Madison County, Randy Tucker. I know he knew someone personally on this flight, as many of you may also as well. So their team has been on site since the very start of the incident. They've secured it. They've been a great partner in this investigation so far and have really aided in our investigation to date. I'm going to give you some initial factual information that we have on the aircraft and the accident. The flight was designated as AirCare 3. It had a departure from the University of Mississippi Medical Center at 12:28. The plane then began operating at approximately 2,500 feet. At one point during the flight, the AirCare 3 ceased communications with air traffic control and then made communications and contact with their base operations, indicating they were having a flight control problem and they were going to attempt a landing into a field. On board that flight were 3 people, 1 pilot, 1 flight nurse, and 1 paramedic. The pilot was employed by Medcare, the operator of the aircraft. The additional 2 individuals were employed by the University of Mississippi Medical Center. The plane in question was a 2012 Eurocopter P2 Plus. And we're currently reviewing and trying to obtain all of the maintenance records in regard to that specific equipment. The operator's been very helpful with us up to this point, and has been working to make sure that we're getting the most accurate information as we go into the investigation. In regard to the timeline, after the takeoff at 12:40, a 911 call from an employee here on the reservation area said he saw and heard a crash of a helicopter. Within 4 minutes, a response began by local authorities. First responders who were on the scene indicated an initial fire plume, followed by a secondary explosion approximately 15 to 20 minutes later. Now, due to the site terrain and where the location is, which you all know we're in a very remote location, it took approximately 2 to 3 hours to extinguish the fire. We'd like to give again, a lot of appreciation to the first responders. They had to drag a lot of hose and lines. They had to shuttle water in and out. So it was a very arduous task. It would be for anyone under normal circumstances, but here it was even more complicated. And we just finished our initial site visit. And so we are, during that site visit, we actually were able to observe what were called tree, is the correct term? Tree scratch marks. I'm trying to be technical in it. These would be consistent with a rotor strike. We've also been able to identify almost all of the main components, and they're in a fairly localized area. As far as the debris field goes, there's a few areas that are away from the main aircraft, but it's generally in one concise area. But it is in a very muddy, hard to access. We had to use ATVs to get in, and it's about anywhere from 6 to 8 inches of standing water where the location is. There is extensive thermal damage, which is consistent with the first response, the responders and the initial person that we saw. So now I'm going to walk you a little bit through the NTSB process and how we will analyze facts. We will determine a probable cause and issue a report of those determination. In every one of our investigations, we designate an investigator in charge. And for this one, it is Mitch Gallo, who is with us here. Mitch is out of our Denver office. We flew him in late in the middle of the night into New Orleans, and he drove up this morning. He has 25 years experience with the NTSB, and he's conducted over 1,400 investigations. So we have a very tenured team and group, along with multiple other professionals that came in through commercial aircraft and many of us that came from Washington, D.C. this morning. Now, Mitch is going to be leading a multidisciplinary group, and he can speak to that in a few moments. But in addition, we brought with us one of our family and survivor assistance team. His name is Dan Morgan. He'll be working with the coroner and the families, working through the process of metallurgical and other things that we're mandated by Congress to do. A few hours ago, we held an organizational meeting and began to establish parties to the investigation. As of this time, the parties to this investigation will be Medtrans, the operator of the aircraft, the Federal Aviation Administration, often referred to as FAA, GMR. GMR is the parent company of Medtrans. This flight was being operated under Medtrans certificate, but GMR will have a representative as a party. Also, because of the manufacture of the aircraft, we will have technical representatives from Pratt & Whitney from Canada, along with Airbus helicopters. We offer this party status to those organizations because they can provide technical expertise, relevant information, and help the development of the best possible factual report. Once a party joins the NTSB investigation, they are not permitted to release any information or talk publicly about the investigation without the consent of the NTSB. Generally, any other media or outward-facing reports you will get will be from the NTSB and most likely the investigator in charge or our media relations department. All of the parties so far have been working with us very well. It's very appreciative. And we will continue to work with them throughout the duration until we come up with what we consider to be the probable cause. Now, today's was our first full day on scene. Number of the members will be on scene for probably a week. At that point, they will start to analyze some of the evidence. But the reason why we're here and we'll do this investigation is to not just find out what happened, but why it happened, and to recommend changes to help preventing things like that from happening in the future. We will not be determining the probable cause or even speculating while we're here on scene about what may have caused this. This is the traditional NTSB way of conducting an investigation, and we'll continue with this one as well. We will try to keep you informed if we have additional updates, but generally what will happen is that we will issue a preliminary report within 30 days, and then a final investigative report will be released in approximately 12 to 24 months. And we do want to ask, especially the media that's covering this, if there's any of the public that has relevant information, such as videos, dash cams, Ring doorbells, in this area, possibly game cams, if they could email us at witness@ntsb.gov. That email address for anyone who has relevant evidence or information regarding this crash is witness@ntsb.gov. So with that, I'm going to ask Mitch to actually come forward and discuss a little bit, because this is a little bit of a unique scene. I know that we won't be taking any of the media there. He will discuss a little bit of the investigative process and what we do in a scene like this. Mitch.
Thank you, Member Inman. My name is Mitch Gallo from the Central Region Denver office. Today's activities, we had an early morning planning meeting on how we're going to proceed, determine scope, and we're actually going to begin our on-scene work. Now, we received a call yesterday, a notification, and at that time we started pulling records, various records regarding the crew and the aircraft, and also radar data. Today's activities will be looking at non-perishable evidence. We'll document that before we move the aircraft at a later date. We'll also follow up with witness interviews. There are several witnesses we want to talk to. Any functional testing at this point will have to be determined at a later date due to the extensive damage from the fire that ensued. Yes, anybody have any questions or?
Yeah, Mr. Inman, you said that it was at 6 to 8 feet water. Did the aircraft go down and wood it the trees?
No. So let me clarify. The question was 6 to 8. I think you said feet. Yes, it was inches, 6 to 8 inches. That can be approximately. That is the area we were stepping into, where the actual location is. It's we haven't seen underneath it, but it's in that general vicinity around it. We, as you can see, we were stepping down into wearing mud boots. So it is a very wet, murky, muddy type location. So the question was, is it an open field area? I can't say that there's a large open field that looks to be what I would suspect where they were attempting to land. It looks like a large clearing, but where the actual wreckage location is, it's right on a tree line, directly on a tree line. That's how we notice the scrape marks. There's portions of the actual rotor blade that are a little bit further into the tree line. Those have all been marked by the sheriff's office and the first responders, and will be part of the evidence collection. Additional questions? Can you tell me who you're with and your name? Sorry, it's okay.
What does the process look like as far as after we finish out here in the field?
And so the question was, what does the process look like after we are done with collecting perishable evidence immediately on scene? We have a number of experts that are not only here, but in DC. The investigator in charge and his team will start to collect what they think may be relevant subsequent items. Now, due to the thermal damage, some of the testing may be more complicated, but they will then take whatever items they believe needs additional testing, or at least collection and retention, and ship them back to DC or put them in a secured holding site in this area. We will then use all of the data that the different parties, such as the ADSB data that was on the plane, a lot of other information that we will use to analyze, and they will start becoming working through what are called group chairman reports. And those group chairman reports will ultimately rise up to a report that will be voted on by the board itself. Sometimes it's a public hearing, sometimes it's not. But at that time, we will use that time to determine the probable cause and then what we consider to be contributing factors. Hopefully, if we find anything, not hopefully, if we find anything of relevance, we will then make recommendations. We've done a lot of air medical flights in the past. We've made many recommendations throughout the last 20 or 30 years. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I was in Denver with Mitch, meeting with an operator of air medical flights, specifically about helicopter operations. So it's something we take very seriously. Something like this, they are actually first responders too, so it's even tougher whenever they go down. Additional questions? Yes, sir. Who are you with and your name?
So when do you have an estimate on when the pilot lost control with air traffic control?
So the question was, sorry, it's been a dry day. My apologies. The question was, when did the pilots lose? The pilots did not lose contact with air traffic control. They stopped communicating. They were then communicating with their dispatch officials. That's not entirely unusual. There's just no additional transmissions. They were letting them know what they believe. We have heard that audio. We will not be releasing that audio at this time, but we have heard it. So the entire team during the organizational meeting was able to hear what they were saying. It was obvious they knew that they were having some type of systems issue. And based on what they commented, they were looking to land in that field. It unfortunately did not happen the way I think that they probably wanted it at the moment.
Sorry, this is Ross Adams with 16 WAPT here in Jackson, Mississippi. Can you explain what you mean by formal damage to the aircraft, and how soon will it be before the wreckage is moved from that location?
So the question was thermal damage and how long it will be before the wreckage is moved. Thermal damage is typically heat or associated fire. That is what we would call thermal damage, because it can be not only radiant heat, it could be direct to fire exposure. Regarding moving, I'll confer with Mitch if you want to speak what your plans are to it.
The question is when we're going to remove the wreckage. I believe there's a weather system. We have to follow that coming in on Friday. We're going to try to do our diligent work prior to that time. And we're shooting on trying to complete that on Thursday afternoon while keeping an eye on weather.
Let me just clarify that. We will take as long as it takes to get the right evidence, to find the right information, to come up with the probable cause. The weather system, we have to worry about everyone's safety here. The good news is the sheriff's office to keep the scene under a secure facility for as long as we need to. We want to be as expeditious as we can with that, while we can at the same time making sure we're preserving the perishable evidence. Other questions? Yes, sir.
When you have to cut a road in there, when you lift it out.
The question is about the wreckage extraction. Mitch, you want to take that?
The wreckage extraction is going to be done by a salvage operator that's experienced in doing this kind of work. We are there to provide counsel to make sure we don't lose any of that evidence during that recovery or try to minimize that.
I have a question.
Yeah, and let me, I guess to clarify that the main question was cut a road in. We were able to drive up very close to the location where we got on the four-wheel drives. So I don't think the main thing I would say is that we're not looking to impact the reserve or any of the reserve activities. We want to do it with the least disruption possible while still maintaining the site. I know it's very important for a lot of people here, and there's also turkey season to open today, so we're understanding of that. Last question, according to them. Yes, ma'am.
What's the overall timeline of finding out what the probable cause is?
So the question was about overall timeline. It'll take as long as it takes. Some are very more complex. In this case, because of probably the damage, there'll need to be some additional review, maybe testing at our headquarters. Generally, we strive to release reports within 2 years. Typically, it's 1 to 2 years. It will be one of those things whenever we'll have to just let the facts dictate what we do next and who works on which aspect. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.